Many people listening are caught between two worlds. On the one hand, you've been taught to seek comfort, to find safety in what you know, to stick with the familiar, to avoid the discomfort that comes with asking hard questions. On the other hand, you sense that the greatest growth, the deepest connections, and the most meaningful work happen precisely when you're willing to feel uncomfortable. You're learning that the things worth discovering often live on the other side of uncertainty. Hello, I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Silard, and welcome to ReSocial, where we rediscover, reflect on, and renew how we approach social interactions so we can develop CMSRs, compassionate, meaningful, sustainable relationships. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Todd Kashdan, professor of psychology at George Mason University and director of the Wellbeing Laboratory. Todd's entire career has been devoted to understanding why we often avoid discomfort when it's actually the gateway to our best selves. His research reveals that curiosity is a fundamental human capacity for growth that begins with the willingness to not know. And for many of our listeners trying to build better relationships in polarized times, that's where everything starts. Dr. Todd Kashdan, welcome to ReSocial. Really glad you're
So,
here.
so good to be here. Love the introduction.
Yeah, and I got to say, and I want all of our listeners to know this, I was asked to give a keynote to 5,000 people on renewing your passion and purpose. And so I took a look back in the literature saying, oh, there's got to be some dimensions of this that I don't know anymore. And I went in there and I discovered Todd. And then I rediscovered Todd for the next 3 years in gratitude, curiosity, purpose, and passion, post traumatic growth. This guy, he's got over 54,000 citations, 225 peer review articles, I think 6 books, if I'm not mistaken. I've got one of them here, which I love, The Upside of Your Dark Side.
Oh, thank you.
This guy is amazing. Todd, I've been really looking forward to this. I'm really glad you're here.
No, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you tapped onto the purpose stuff because that's the latest work that we're working on right now in the lab.
Excellent, excellent. So we will definitely be talking about that. But let's, they say that research is me search. If you're willing, let's go back a little bit and go back to some of the really challenging childhood experiences that you had that influenced you in terms of pursuing the career you did and becoming interested in everything from post-traumatic growth to acceptance to managing challenging emotions. So you were two, Todd, when your father left your family. Is that right?
Yes. So obviously, I don't have really a memory of it. My twin brother and we were raised by a single mom. We grew up in a low income neighborhood. I researched it relatively recently. It's very interesting because you don't hear much about this, where it was 96% African American neighborhood, and so you don't often think of the white kids are the minority. But that's it's you could be the atheist in the religious community, you could be the religious person in the atheist community. So that was challenging. And then lost my mother when I was 13 years old. Was raised by my grandmother, and like you said, like all of these things are through lines that kind of led me to some of these lines of research that I do. And it allows me to be pretty compassionate for people that have quite a number of adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah. I'm sure if you do the ACE test, you come up very, very high. What's amazing for me is that after adversity, some people break and other people break records. And you're clearly in the second group. I really want our listeners to understand what you went through and how you've transcended it and use it as a fuel to develop your own purpose, your own passion for what you've been working on and changing in the world. Your mother raised you on her own. What was your relationship like with her?
Every So I'll be honest, most of this is repressed experiences. I don't remember that much except from what
Mm,
people told me and pictures. So you kind of invent your own stories by looking through these photo
mm.
albums. But everyone describes that I was a mama's boy and I was always around her. There's that phrase of always be touching. Like I always had like my finger on her. I was holding her arm, and like that's the description. And this is the 70s. So before my time, but my understanding is lots of neighbors came over my house, opened the fridge, and there was a lot of weed in my refrigerator for the neighborhood. So my mom was a very popular social person.
Okay, that sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of these weird things because, now I have 3 daughters of my own. I wish she was around. She got to see them. Like, some of them look like her, remind me of like how people describe her. But one of the challenging things is when you lose a parent or you have parents that are neglectful, which is not what I experienced in this case, is that you have to learn the social norms and how to behave and how not to be unpopular, how not to be bullied, how not to be ostracized in the worst, most inefficient manner possible, which is trial and error. And so, really quickly, you become a social scientist. And so, anyone that's experienced a parent or a caregiver that was a big substance user, alcohol, work your way upwards towards, towards meth, you learn very quick what are the first indicators that's going to be a good day or a bad day, and you make sure to kind of walk on eggshells to make things are okay. And for me, the outside world was walking on eggshells of I'm in a neighborhood where it's not that safe, and how do I figure out where it's okay for me to cross the street? I could walk past that group of kids. Is that guy looking at me like he's going to steal my wallet, which happened in my neighborhood several times. And over time, you realize of like, this is an interesting approach to the world. You ask questions, you develop hypotheses, you test them, and then who knew that 20 years later, I can make a living off of this?
Well, you've impacted so many people with what you've taken from the challenges you faced growing up, how you've learned from them. When you were 13, when your mother passed away, Todd, there was a moment where you wanted to see her and you went to the hospital. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that? What you were going through?
Yeah, you clearly do your reading. So she was dying of cancer, and she had already lost her hair, which I had seen. This is a beautiful woman who was the homecoming queen of her high school, and I remember after she passed away, we were looking through her stuff. I found this shoebox of love letters from whoever was ardently interested in my mother, and it was just I never even read them all. There were just so many letters, and so losing her hair was a
Mm,
really big deal. It was really stressful, and I imagine that anyone listening who was particularly like how the culture values physical attractiveness in women, that it's really hard when there's a huge scar or,
mm,
mastectomy or losing your hair. And so when she was dying, we came to the hospital. We wanted to see her. It was clear from adults that these were the remaining days, and nobody would let us see her. Aunts, uncles, grandmother, and the concern was that it would alter our memory of what she looked like. And so
mm.
I remember using my twin brother's shoulders as a launching pad to try to push up so I could see through the window and just see my mom. She didn't see me. And she's in the hospital bed. She lost her hair. She was clearly dying. And then I was not allowed to say goodbye to the living version of my mom. And there's no good answers to these situations, but it does raise a couple things. You and I, before we popped on, we talked about being a dad. And as a parent or a caregiver or a teacher or a mentor, you're faced with these uncertain situations, which is how do you make the best decision possible, knowing that you have no idea what the right decision is because you can't predict the future? Now,
Yeah.
in this case, I don't blame anyone, but I do, even my younger self now has held deeply, which is I will let my kids and myself handle great levels of adversity and not steal their agency to decide what the narrative of their life is going to be. So, to some degree, I wanted to hug my mom one last time as a living creature, and that didn't happen. And
Mm.
it's interesting to think about
They
that.
decided for you that was not
Yeah.
gonna be good because of how she looked.
Yeah, so when we toss around these words like agency and self-determination, but this is what it looks like is, do you want to take that away from another human being? And in general, the answer is no. Almost always the answer is no, and we'll deal with the repercussions later.
So there you are, you feel like your agency's been taken from maybe subconsciously at 13 years old, but you feel like you're not able to hug your mother before she passes. Then you go back to school. I've read your story, and I think it'd be really helpful for our listeners. When you go back to school, you also had another experience with the way students were managing the situation, knowing about what happened, that also wasn't exactly helpful for you.
Yeah, and again, you can't blame a bunch of 13-year-olds at a middle school. So apparently I don't remember how many days that we were out of school. I think my twin brother and I had 2 weeks that we weren't in school. And obviously teachers were supportive and the principal was supportive. And they made an announcement in the school while we weren't there that our mom died, which is very strange because I don't think people do that anymore. It's like a HIPAA violation kind of thing. And so when we came back to school, we were ghosted by everybody. A bunch of kids developing a surge of hormones, having very little social skills, really small prefrontal cortices, having no idea how to interact with us. And the default response where everyone was, I'm not going to look at Todd and Andy. I'm not going to talk to them. And it felt horrendous. And this goes for teachers too. Teachers didn't want to call on us. And so teachers avoided us, kids avoided us. And then there was one kid who was not a close friend of mine. He was on the football team, this guy, Jeff Paget, and we had never had a serious interaction ever. And in the hallway, he just walked up to me and he put his hand on my shoulder, never touched me before, and just said like, hey, how are you doing? And then I'm probably like possibly going to cry even just talking about it. And then he had his arm around me, like my bodyguard, my protector, that goes in there, and just
Yeah.
kind of like walked me to class. And I've never forgotten this guy, Jeff, because it was kind of out of character, kind of stepped up into a tough situation. And it was so soft and gentle. This was a really big, tough lineman on the football team. And yeah, he passed away a few years ago. And I made an ode to him publicly and made sure that it was shared to his sister and his parents. And they're like, we never knew this side of Jeff. And this is such a beautiful gift to give. And I told them, I've held on to this for over 3 decades, this story.
Wow.
And the importance of it is real simple, is you do not realize the absolute power you have to influence the quality of life of the person with a single interaction.
Just one act of kindness. It's also really interesting because you've written a lot about experiential avoidance, especially of when we feel mixed emotions, challenging emotions.
Yeah, and Anthony, you actually bring up something else, which I've never studied. I don't know other people that have studied this as well, which is there is the unwillingness to be in contact with your feelings, and then there's the misprediction that someone else's feelings are so terrible that I'm going to avoid trying to inject that emotion in them. So it's kind of like this 2-tiered level of experiential avoidance
Yeah.
that was happening.
Jeff, this gentle giant you're describing, this guy with a big heart and a big body, it sounds like, reminds me of this. There was this 7-year-old, it was, I think, in Wisconsin, and they had this, it was one of these small towns, and they had this kind of competition for who could commit the greatest act of kindness. And it went to this 7-year-old because his neighbor, this guy who's like 75 years old, his wife passed away. And this 7-year-old just became like really instrumental in helping this guy process his grief. And the local reporter asked him, well, what did you do? Like, what did you do that helped this man so much? He said, oh, I just sat with him and let him cry. So it's just the sheer presence. Okay, so for our listeners, we're here with Dr. Todd Kashdan. We'll be back in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Is there a protective shell around your heart holding you back from the connection you know is possible in your life? It's time to find your path to redemption. Introducing Love and Suffering by Dr. Anthony Silard. In Love and Suffering, which has received 4 book awards in psychology and mental health and 99% 5-star reviews on Amazon, Dr. Silard overturns what we've been told over a lifetime about love, forgiveness, acceptance, and gratitude. New York Times bestselling author Adam Alter calls Love and Suffering a compelling roadmap for a more connected and meaningful life. When you order Love and Suffering, 100% of the author's proceeds are donated to nonprofit education programs in Africa and Latin America. Invite more love into your life today. Love and Suffering by Anthony Silard is available now at Amazon.com and wherever books are sold. What if everything you've been taught about happiness and friendship is wrong? The artoflivingfree.org, the learning platform of the Center for Social Leadership, would like to offer you 2 free books by Dr. Anthony Silard: The Myth of Friendship, How Your Misunderstandings About Friendship Keep You Lonely, and The Myth of Happiness, How Your Definition of Happiness Creates Your Unhappiness. Get your free personal copies of The Myth of Friendship and The Myth of Happiness today. It's simple and easy. Go to theartoflivingfree.org/free happiness and friendship books and enter your email, then confirm the confirmation email in your inbox. You'll receive the links to download The Myth of Friendship and The Myth of Happiness. Enjoy your 2 free books by Dr. Anthony Silard today at theartoflivingfree.org/free happiness and friendship books.
Hello, this is Dr. Anthony Silard. Welcome back to ReSocial. I'm here with Dr. Todd Kashdan, sharing really moving stories about how he's grown up. Let's shift now, Todd, into your kind of coming of age as a psychologist. I know that one of your formative moments was with a Vietnam War veteran. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you learned from that interaction?
Yeah. So as a grad student, I was working at the National Crime Victim Center in South Carolina. New Yorker in South Carolina is a very interesting experience by itself for another day. And when I was working at the VA hospital, I was basically doing orientation for soldiers returning back into civilian life. And for anyone that doesn't have contact with combat veterans in any country, it's very difficult to return to garbage on Mondays and Fridays and then going through the cereal aisle, which if you ever saw the movie The Hurt Locker, it captures the last scene when he's
Uh,
walking through and stuck in the cereal aisle trying to figure out what of the hundreds of varieties he realized, you know what? I want to go back to combat. There's more meaning and purpose there. And this feels meaningless. And so I had a veteran who in a meeting with about 20 other people,
uh,
was describing a story of one of the bits of advice he got from his therapist was to spend more time with his close friends. His close friends bought him a ticket to a New York Knicks basketball game. And in the beginning, before the game start, they turn the lights down. Often they have fireworks, pyrotechnics, and they introduce all the players and everyone starts cheering. And as soon as this happened, he got really frightened and he jumped and he dove underneath this chair and laid there thinking that it was an IED or a bomb or something to that effect. And everybody was pointing and laughing at him. And he walked out of Madison Square Garden and felt humiliated. Not only did he not see a basketball game, he actually stopped contact with the friends that brought him there. And this was all a nice gesture. It was really like lots of misunderstandings happening in all different directions. And this led us to I won't talk about the therapy that we did together, but this led to like a very interesting research question, which was when veterans return back to civilian life, what are they striving towards? Where do they find meaning? Where do they find joy in their lives? And what are the things that get in the way? And it's amazing how much research is on what leads to post traumatic stress disorder or anxiety or depression in the aftermath of being exposed to trauma, and very little about how do you reconstruct your life in the aftermath of trauma.
That's right. It's interesting because I read some of your work on post traumatic distress and post traumatic growth and why some people manage to make that transformation from post traumatic distress into growth. And one of your studies, you found that when people rely on experiential avoidance, it reduces their well being and it makes post traumatic growth elusive. I think with the experience you shared earlier of your hoping to get some support in processing grief at school or even just be treated as a normal human being rather than an outcast, that as well as what this veteran was going through, in both cases, it really seems like there's other people who are not stepping up and are avoiding some of the challenging emotions they've experienced. And you've done a tremendous amount of research, Todd, on how avoiding the mixed emotions that emerge within us daily is really not a good idea. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about why isn't that a good thing to do and how can we become better?
Yeah. So if you follow this veteran study, one of the interesting things we found was when you're even beyond just the emotions, when you construct your life around goals such as trying to experience positive emotional experiences. I want to experience happiness. I want to experience joy, or I want to feel less stressed. This describes a lot of less frustration, less anger, very common goals that people describe. The more frequent or common those goals are that your life is organized around, the less happy you are, the less meaning that you end up developing, the less satisfying your relationships are. And so it ends up being like a little bit counterproductive. It's a little bit of paradox of the more that you try to seek positive experiences and fewer negative experiences, the more you end up getting exactly what you don't want that happens there. And so the concrete advice is simple, is organize your life around something other than the feelings and thoughts that you're going to experience or you want to experience. And so if you're talking about like things outside the self, and our other work has shown very consistently that people that are better at describing exactly what it is they're feeling at the moment, especially mixed emotions like you described. So if you think about first dates, roller coasters, surfing, none of these are pure positive or pure negative experiences. They tend to be like a nice mixture, right? A little bit of excitement, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of like intrigue, a little bit of worry. And the quick argument is don't run away from mixed emotional experiences because they tend to be the greatest moments possible. And those negative emotions have a function. The function is to make sure that you don't injure yourself, you don't kill yourself, and that you don't harm someone else that happens there. Great. But the search for intrigue, the search for wonder, the search for joy, the combination of those two in a moment, and the combination is what leads to these great experiences. And what we often look for is purity. And the more they're able to describe precisely the exact number, wide range of emotional experience you have, the less likely you are able, or the more likely you're able to manage the situation to get the best possible outcome that you want. And there are two ways that I'll describe this. One is Friday happens, typical work week, it ends, you go out for happy hour. And if you can describe precisely what you're feeling, you might feel a sense of relief that the work is over. You might be anxious because you're worried about, you already have the sun, you know, the scaries of worrying about Monday popping up, what projects are coming up. If you can describe your emotions precisely, you're less likely to binge drink and you're less likely to drink more than you intended to. That is a great thing because you should do what you want to do. You shouldn't be pushed and pulled by this flesh coated machine that's you. The second place where it becomes really useful is you're going to be provoked by other people. People are going to say things that annoy you. People are going to bump into you and people are going to push your buttons. So just going to say the wrong question, phrase it the wrong way. I always had this philosophy of like assume benevolence until proven otherwise, but you're going to be activated. And what we find is people that can precisely describe what they're feeling in these moments, they are less likely to aggress towards people that provoke them verbally and physically. And they're less likely to be hostile in general, thinking about, I can't stand people, hell is other people,
Mm.
I don't really like crowds. These very common adages that people use, you are less likely to have these general statements about the world is a dangerous, annoying place if you can precisely describe your feelings. And so it's worth investing some time per day. Start when you're relatively calm in terms of like, what exactly is the list of emotions that are flowing through me?
Well, this is a really important lesson for all of our listeners out there. Dr. Todd Kashdan and what he's sharing, I think, is so important. I personally believe that all addictions tend to stem from some emotions we're experiencing that we don't want to face. So we're running from them in some way. So whether you have your study, which I read, Todd, on binge drinking, when we can't engage in affect labeling, we can't label or name our emotions because we can't confront them, then we end up in all of these attachment to objects, whether you name your poison, whether it's your screens or random sex or alcohol or drugs or whatever, shopping, that we think is going to help us escape ultimately from ourselves, but it never works. And I want to say here also, Todd, so our listeners can connect with you. Where can they find out about your books and the wonderful research you're doing so they can learn more?
So thank you. Everything I'm giving away, I have a Substack called Provoked. So if you just put Provoked Substack in Google, you'll find it. And then all the links, everything, I'm giving science away all the time.
What
I
is it
think
called again? Your Substack?
Provoked. So Provoked by Todd Kashdan.
Provoked.
Yeah. So I think I've published 300 articles at this point.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I'm going to be reading those myself. And I'm also going to put them in the show notes. So, Todd, I got to say, my day's a much better one for the connection we further developed here. You've been a wonderful guest and so much wisdom you're sharing with our listeners. Thank you for joining us on ReSocial.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You are an amazing Michael Jordan of question asking.
Well, I haven't heard that one before. I'll take it, man. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, I'm Anthony Silard, and thank you for tuning in to ReSocial. I'd like to ask you a question and a favor. First, the question. Would you like to leave some feedback and let us know what you've enjoyed about ReSocial and also what can be improved? Also, feel free to let us know about any kind of episodes that you'd like to have on ReSocial, any issues you'd like us to address. If you'd like to leave any feedback, please leave it at ReSocial at theartoflivingfree.org. Once again, ReSocial at theartoflivingfree.org. Now for the favor, please subscribe or follow. That really helps us to get top tier guests. So you're subscribing or following us at ReSocial makes a big difference. Also, I'd like to thank the ReSocial team, Madeline McLeod, our senior producer, Michele Bordone, our associate producer, and Ariane Escobar, our director of media relations. They have made ReSocial happen. So again, thanks for tuning into ReSocial and wishing you a good rest of your day. Let's end the way we always do. Until we meet again, please remember that between you and the CMSRs, the compassionate, meaningful, sustainable relationships you desire in your life, lies an invisible social barrier you construct in your mind. It's entirely up to you to push through this barrier and watch it disappear into the mist. Be the change you desire and reach out to another person. Then use the tools you learn, refine, and align with your own values in ReSocial to develop a CMSR. Be kind, be generous, and be caring. I'm Dr. Anthony Silard. Thank you for joining us on ReSocial. I'm looking forward to being together with you again next week in the world filled with CMSRs we are creating together.